what we really need to work on, I think I echo what Tom says there, we really need to work on our solidarity. We are justified in going out on strike over our miserable offer of pay for us. And what really makes me very angry is that support staff's wages are pretty low anyway, particularly our cleaners, our caretakers, without whom the university could not run. These staff are absolutely key to the running of the place. Nobody would notice if the SMT disappeared for a week, but they would certainly notice if the caretakers and cleaners weren't there. And one of the things that really worries me is that as the senior managers and the vice-chancellor's pay goes up by 6%, by 7% more in some institutions, the gap between the lowest paid and the highest paid members of staff in an institution is widening and widening and widening. This is really unhealthy. It's unhealthy in any organisation. And in a university like ours, which states in its mission statement that it wants to be a beacon of good practice to our community, this is hardly setting the best example. We are facing the worst drop in our standards of living for nearly a century.
And what are the universities doing? They've got these cash surpluses which are being built up, partly because they're not paying us. And so what do? They squirrel the money away on pet projects. They waste it at the University of Sussex on massive consultancies to outsource things. They've been spending the last 2 years trying to outsource catering and estates. And it's costing them a fortune in management time and everything else. Money no object to them. They can go up first class to London, they can stay in hotels, doing their pet silly dreams about how they want to run the new neoliberal University of Sussex. But we don't get the money. We are getting pay cuts and they're having a wonderful time at our expense. The people who aren't members of unions see what's happening. They're thinking about what's going on and some of them are going to join in. We've got to recruit more people in this. There's lots of people here, but there should be more and we've got to work on it. Okay, brilliant. So the students, thanks ever so much for showing us what to do. And when the likes of us are sort of sitting in our bath chairs, I hope it's you here encouraging everybody else to do stuff. So thanks a lot, and thanks for your support, and everybody else. We're all in it together, and let's keep it up.
A member of staff at the University of Brighton, an academic or a lecturer, and I wanted to say that I was really glad to be on strike today. Despite the rain and so on, it felt really, really good to down tools and say, enough is enough. What's happening in universities is destroying this thing that's very, very precious to me, and very, very precious also, I presume, to most of you. I'm talking here about the contradictory demands that we're pummeled with every day, day in, day out. The second point, though, speaking as a trade unionist, I wanted to talk a little bit, and again briefly, about the campaign that we're involved in, because it is a campaign, the headline claim of which is about pay. And as has already been mentioned, the effective pay cut that we've all, whether we're administrative workers or student support workers or academic staff, suffered over the last 3 to 4 years, that's not the only aspect, that's not the only phase in the fight for fairness of pay. There is also our demand that we get the employers to the table to sit down and talk about how we can abolish the use of zero-hour contracts in higher education. This nasty, nasty, cheap and exploitative wildfire. We also want to get the employers to agree to sit down and discuss how we go implementing a living wage for all employees, all people who work at the university. Whether or not you're a contracted out employee or you're a member of the university staff, we shouldn't have people on a minimum wage that makes it your life very, very difficult and in some places unbearable. Finally, we wanted the employers to agree to do something about the gender pay gap in higher education. And it's at this point as well we need to remind ourselves that the money is there. There's over $1 billion surplus in the coffers of higher education institutions at this point. Now, we might have massive problems with how it got there, the way in which our students are being charged horrific amounts of money, whether they're domestic students or also our international students. But the fact is the money is there. And at this point we have to ask ourselves, well, why are the employers playing such hardball?
When they... the local National Union of Teachers. It's very interesting hearing the other speakers talk about life and work in universities and just how many parallels there are with teaching at the moment. We were on strike, of course, 2 weeks ago today. as part of rolling regional action that both the NUT and our sister union in teaching, the NESUWT, have been taking. And we had a brilliant response from our membership. I think we shut more schools and had more members out in the last strike than we did even in the pension strikes in 2011, and they were very well supported themselves. Now, the reason I think that we got such a massive response from our members was yes, it's because, you know, we are completely aware that working till 68 in the classroom is simply ridiculous and it needs to be challenged. We are completely aware that what the government brought in, we're not fighting actually over the amount of pay rise, we're fighting against the breakup of our national pay system and the introduction of what the government call performance-related pay, but it isn't anything of the sort, it's competitive pay. It's a pay system where teachers compete with each other to get pay increments. And we're fighting that, and very much so, we're fighting the next round of attacks that it's very, very clear is coming, which is on our work. The complete lack of trust in teachers as a profession, the damage that is doing to our students in the classroom. That is really, I think, the overriding reason that our strike was so successful. And to be honest, we had one fantastic recruitment sergeant for the unions, which is Michael Gove. The hatred for Michael Gove is unbelievable. And I don't just mean from, you know, militant trade unionists like myself. Almost certainly, any group of teachers talking about Michael Gove, they don't talk about his resignation, they talk about his assassination. that is genuinely not an exaggeration. I'm not condoning that. There is a huge anger. Michael Gove has offered talks. I personally don't believe we should go into those talks without having a stick to beat him with, and that stick is further national strikes planned, you know, so we can go in and say, well, these are going ahead unless we get concessions. That's not the position we're in. It does show that at the end of the day, we need, as much as we need to be attacking the government, we need to be pressuring our own leaderships to make sure we have clear and explainable campaigns of action where we know where we are going. I believe the NUT has come out stronger from the last strike. Certainly in my area we have more reps, we have better school groups, we have more organisation on the ground. Now that's great.
Well, firstly, I'd just like to say huge solidarity from the Sussex students, where we occupied the biggest lecture theatre on campus last night. But more importantly, we came out this morning onto the picket lines, where it was fantastic to see students and staff uniting to defend higher education. And having spoken to students around the country, you know, Sussex is not a one-off. In Sheffield, in SOAS, at SOAS University in London, in Birmingham as well, there's been occupations and huge actions on the picket lines between students and staff. And I think that shows that there is a real student support for lecturers and staff who are striking about their pay. So don't listen to management when they try and divide us and tell you that there's no student support for it and that your students are angry at disruption. Because at Sussex University, the management have been actually quite vicious about that, and it's really out of order. So don't listen to them when they tell you that. We fully support you. Actually, it grows from an understanding that this strike is about more than protecting pay. Because after what we've seen in the last 3 years of this Tory government, what we've seen in their policies for higher education, with the rise in fees, with the huge cuts in funding, with the course closures, and with the widespread privatisation that they plan for campuses across the country, actually students realise that this strike is very important, because it's all three unions, whether it's lecturers or librarians or porters or cleaners, all uniting to defend higher education. And actually this cannot be taken out of context of the rest of the Tories' austerity policies. If you see the way that they're carving up the NHS, the huge cuts in funding to that, the huge cuts in funding to the public sector, and the huge job losses we've seen there, the cuts in funding to welfare and disability benefits and so on. Actually this strike is a key industrial action and leads the resistance to austerity and to the marketisation of higher education. So from students, thank you for that, for starting that off. But so next time, when you're all out.
Now that wasn't intended to be nasty for its own sake, and it wasn't being nasty, it was just being honest. And it produces a tension, and for those of us who are in that situation, who go to work tomorrow and will see colleagues who have walked across our picket line, that's a tension that we have to use and play with. Not to worsen it for its own sake, and not even necessarily to worsen it, it seems to me. It's an opportunity for us to have the same discussion again in different circumstances, because we need to win, both to union membership and to support of the strike action. UCU represents over 64% of the academic and research staff at the university. And even if it was only 50 or 60% of our members who were taking action, we could win this alone. But we can win it faster if we are united as a union. We can win it even faster if the unions are united across the scope of representation in the university.
I'm a textile student, this is where the loom is, I can't not use the loom today, and if I don't, there's going to be pressure on my course. And then we sat down and explained to them slowly precisely what it means, precisely what the links are between a pay dispute and privatisation of higher education more broadly. And they were quickly very much like, oh, I actually understand this, I didn't really know what it was about, I thought that it was just lecturers looking out for their interests, but now I can understand that this is part of a wider fight. By crossing a picket line, then it makes the picket line worthless. Students go, oh yeah, of course, be a citizen, in a democratic citizen in a nation state, if it isn't about learning when it's important to fight for things you believe in.
We were on strike today because the way in which we've been paid over the last 3 and now we're going into the 4th year, we don't consider fair. And it's not just a moral point, it's actually that staff at the university, and you saw as well, there was different unions out today. So Unison, for example, they have caterers and caretakers, they have porters and so on. In UCU, we've got academic staff, but also academic related. And these are people, some of whose salaries are not very high. So if we're offered 1%, which we have been offered this year, and we were offered again for the last 3 years, and accepted for the last 3 years, this year we're fighting, it means given the cost of inflation, our pay is here and not moving, equivalent to the cost of inflation. So lots of people will know that the energy companies are raising prices between 8 and 10% this coming into autumn now. The cost of travel is very, very expensive, not just, public transport, the trains and the buses, but also the cost of petrol. People can't afford to pay childcare, people can't afford to pay their bills, so we consider that our headline, if you like, is about fair play. There's £1 billion plus sitting in university coffers. A large part of that is actually made up of student fees. Now, my union, and I think all of the higher education unions, were very, very adamantly opposed to the tripling of tuition fees. We want higher education to be a public service, to be freely available to all who want to go to it. It's a stream of money going into universities, so students and staff have to ask, where's it going? Where's that money going? Because we know it's not going on the types of things we would like to see it going on, which is about staff pay, but it's also about better library services, it's about smaller seminar sizes, it's about more one-on-one tutorials, it's about more frequent and more thorough feedback and so on. So really, really sorry that students' classes were disrupted today. I'm a lecturer. The one thing I want to do is teach, and I want to be part of a team that teaches to the best of our ability all the time.
The main concern, the dispute is about pay. It's about the fact that we've lost 13% at least, I think it's more, over the last 4 years in real value growth. Even junior lecturers are now finding it hard to pay the mortgage and do the things that they need to. But it's not just lecturers. And there's 50% or more of university writing staff, the people who work in libraries, the technicians, the janitors, the cleaners, the catering staff, without whom the university couldn't work. And they earn even less than that. And for them to be offered 1%, when the rate of inflation is 2.7%, again, for the 5th year in succession, means that people are up against the wall when it comes to paying their bills. So the dispute primarily